During the Enlightenment, most countries were monarchies. Some of the main ideas of the Enlightenment and Renaissance, such as the individual's freedom and the importance of science, had not yet brought any political change. With better education and more opportunities to analyze their surroundings, people had started to question if their treatment by the state was just.
Enter John Locke. John Locke is sometimes referred to as the most important and influential writer of the Enlightenment in terms of revolutions. In the book The Two Treatises of Government, 1689, he argues for the rights given to the people by nature, also known as natural rights. These rights were life, liberty, property, and health. In the two treatises, Locke argues for these rights through a religious perspective. Locke writes, "Hereby must be meant that either this grant of God gave Adam property," which means that men have the right to property as it was given to them by God. Locke opposes the previous thinker on the topic, Thomas Hobbes, who validated dictatorial monarchies in the belief that they were able to uphold order in chaos. Locke instead used natural rights to argue for how a state should be organized, and that it is actually the people who choose to give up some of their personal choices for benefits like protection. Conveniently enough, Locke's ideas on property did not apply to the native Indians. Locke defined property as when men mix their labor with the land. The natives did not mix their labor with the land, as they simply hunted and collected food rather than cultivated. This idea validated conquering the natives' lands and thusly validated the expansion of European settlements in America through armed conflict. The idea also shows European exploitation and casual racism against the Native Americans. An event that mirrored Locke's views was the American Revolution, 1765 to 1783. The revolution was based on the colonists' desire for independence from Britain. With this came the American Declaration of Independence in 1776. It had three key standpoints, which were that all men have the right to freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These ideas were not only similar to Locke's, but might have also been inspired by them. Thomas Jefferson, the third American president, had for example written that he considered Locke to be one of the greatest men in history. One can also see John Locke's influence in the American Constitution, especially in the right to bear arms, which is a clear example that the people should always have the ability to overthrow their government. Further consequences of the revolution can be seen in the differences in spelling between Britain and America. The Americans wanted a culture of their own. This was partially achieved with the publishing of the American Spelling Book in 1783 by Noah Webster. According to Joshua Kendall in the book The Forgotten Founding Father, the spelling book sold approximately 100 million copies and featured American pronunciation, morality, principles of the American government, and spelling. The book successfully simplified the English language, removing unnecessary E's and U's, and simplifying spelling in general. Some examples of these were changing the spelling of plow, the changing of center, and making the pronunciation more clear. For example, ladder in the English pronunciation became ladder.
The late 1700s was a time of drastic societal change throughout the whole of the Western world. The rise of new authors and writers who, together with the simultaneous rise of different isms, created the contemporary literature of that time. Isms such as liberalism preached the right of the human to be able to find his own path in life. This worked as a base domain for the development of many other isms. The notable and clearly liberal writer Thomas Paine, born in Britain in 1737, is known as one of the most important authors during the American independence movement in terms of theology and liberalism. He spent the majority of his life on the offshore colonies in North America and wrote important literary works such as the poem Liberty Tree, which intended to motivate people in the opposition against the British Crown, and the book The Rights of Man, intended to propose a practical implementation of liberalism. One of his more prominent works was The Age of Reason, published in 1794. Similar to his other works, this book opposed the societal norms that existed during the 1700s, but in a theological manner. Thomas Paine was a firm believer in the religious ideology of theism. Similar to other religions, Paine believed that there had been an initial creator, but that this creator, this God, had distanced himself after the creation, that God was just a watchmaker that now was letting his creation work by itself. Paine proposed his ideas through a mixture of refuting and exposing the many loopholes and contradicting preachings of the churches of different religions at the time. The first section of the book is a great example of how he did this, where he documented his take on the meaning of the word revelation. Paine, for example, explained how the stories of Jesus Christ were never documented by Jesus himself, but by others. By this, Paine explained how the long line of retelling killed off the purely revelating parts of these stories. He also brought up how an individual's revelation cannot happen through a book, but only through self-experience.
When Moses told the children of Israel that he received the 2 tables of commandments from the hands of God, they were not obliged to believe him because they had no other authority for it than his telling them so.
Paine goes on to alternatively define what he calls the true words of God by stating that the true word of God is the creation that we behold. He consequently insinuates how simply living and observing pure existence is to listen to the word of God, and thus links everything back to the main principles of theism.
Oh hi, I didn't see it. The Enlightenment divides into different distinctive lines, radical and modical Enlightenment. The radical line was portrayed in plenty of the novels that was written during the era. One novel that stands out is Robinson Crusoe, written by the famous author Daniel Defoe in 1719. Defoe's purpose behind writing the novel was to present an adventurous story that included realistic themes. Robinson Crusoe is important for the Enlightenment as it gave birth to a whole new genre. It is one of the first genres that portrays the so-called modern era, as well as it is Defoe's most well-known novel by them all. Robinson Crusoe is an adventuristic and realistic novel about a young man born in York, England, who decides to go on a life-changing journey across the world. This shows the deep urge for exploring and searching for answers during the era. And the fact that Crusoe was a normal British bourgeois that lived a normal life shows the realistic themes portrayed in the novel. During the journey, Crusoe gets stranded on an isolated island together with his new friend Friday, who is saved from the cannibals on the island. Together, they escaped through a passing British ship and lived happily ever after in England. The novel portrays how society looked during the Enlightenment. The novel shows states exploring and expanding, both geographically and economically. This shows colonialism, globalism, and capitalism, which were common ideas during the Enlightenment. All of these topics together created a sense of reliability, convincing that this could have actually happened as it was the norm in society, especially in England, who was leading worldwide in terms of these things. Novels during the Enlightenment follow realistic themes that felt modern and reliable as they portrayed society and modern movements for that time, such as capitalism, colonialism, globalization, industrialism, adventuralism.
As people started to learn how to read independently from their socio-economic status, reading became more popular as well, thanks to literature growing across all different types of classes in society. Hence, realistic novels related to themes of social upheaval, reversals of personal status, political satire, geographical exploration, and civilized humanity grew in popularity due to different types of people feeling connected to the theme as it reflects their social status or everyday life.
Also, proof that Robinson Crusoe following the realistic theme is obvious and portrayed in the sentence, "I often stopped, and how I got out, and I could not help but smile at the thought of travelling through Yorkshire, equipped and dressed this way." Page 167. The sentence includes most of the criteria for the realistic theme, such as first-person narrator, using real places, and using details. The art of keeping literature realistic was something that was very popular during the Enlightenment. Science was popular as people started to get bored of the glorification and the idealistic things that surrounded society and literature for the last centuries. Due to lack of credibility in religions, they became questioned as people searched for the truth. People also didn't want novels and literature to represent things that wasn't proved to be true. Therefore, the realistic perspective of life became a very popular theme. So believing that people became bored of glorification and over-dramatization led to the realistic theme becoming so popular as it did, as well as the texts written by the scientific communities. Independent thought was embraced. Skepticism ran freely through work. New values, individualism, and emphasis on science.
John Milton was an English poet and intellectual who served as a civil servant for the Commonwealth of England under its Council of State and later under Oliver Cromwell. He wrote at a time of religious flux and political upheaval, and is best known for his epic poem Paradise Lost, written in blank verse.
Paradise Lost was published in 1667, and its purpose was clear and impactful, questioning the concept of freedom, the views of religion, and indirectly revolutionizing scientific thinking. Paradise Lost challenged the normalized culture that existed in England during the 1700s. According to Milton himself, the purpose of Paradise Lost was to justify the ways of God to man. This means that he wanted to explain what is obscure and unclear in the Bible. The scientific revolution was a series of events that marked the emergence of modern science during the early modern period, when developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, including human anatomy, and chemistry transformed views of society about nature. The scientific revolution influenced the development of the Enlightenment values of individualism because it demonstrated the power of the human mind. Political ideals were greatly influenced by the writings of John Locke. One thing he argued for was individual conscience and being free from state control. This relates back to Milton, who was also for individual conscience but showed this in a different way. During the Enlightenment, authority was controlled by both the government and the church. Religions have morals and rules of their own, and if England's state is a Christian-controlled authority, the chances of getting affected by these rules are inevitable. Milton wanted to remove this and have an authority primarily without religious impact. The separation of church and state is a philosophical and jurisprudential concept for defining political distance in the relationship between religious organization and the nation-state. Conceptually, the term refers to the creation of a secular state and to this establishment, the changing of an existing, formal relationship between the church and the state.